Hi, I'm Paul from the Studio Rats. Now, I keep getting asked questions in the comments to do a comparison between the Quad Cortex and my Boss GT-1000 core. If anyone's seen the channel before, you'll know that I'm a big fan of the Boss GT-1000. I think it's a great sounding unit and it feels really, really responsive. So recently I got the Quad Cortex and I've been doing some videos on that, and people have been interested to see what the differences are between the two. Because these units are very different in what they do, what I'm going to do is just to stick to just the basic sounds that you can get within the GT-1000 and compare them with the basic sounds that you can get within the Quad Cortex. I'm not going to do any capturing inside the Quad Cortex, we're just going to be using the stock sounds. I've programmed two patches into each of the units. I've programmed a Fender Deluxe patch into the Boss GT-1000 core, and also a Fender Deluxe sound into the Quad Cortex, and also a Marshall Plexi sound into both of the units. So what we're going to do is just to play through the sounds, and I'm going to comment on what I prefer in the feel and the sound. This is the Quad Cortex. And this is the GT-1000. The initial patch inside the GT-1000 has a lot less bass than the initial patch inside the Quad Cortex. Now this is using the bass on about 50% on each unit, and I don't think that's a bad thing for the GT-1000, because if I was going to be recording that patch, I would be taking off or filtering off that amount of bass for the recording. So GT-1000 and the Quad Cortex. GT-1000 and Quad Cortex. You can hear that they sound really, really close. If we talk about feel playing through both of these units, they both feel great under the fingers. The GT-1000 feels slightly more responsive. That's Quad Cortex, and that's the GT-1000. One of the things that I really love about the Quad Cortex is how easy it is to edit on the actual unit. If I'm using the GT-1000 core, like I've got here, the way that I like to edit these patches is to use the editor that you can get on PC or Mac. It makes it a breeze to edit, but if I was actually going to be programming this live or adjusting things live, it would be a lot harder to do on the GT-1000 than it would be to do on the Quad Cortex. If I want to adjust anything with the Quad Cortex, I just touch the screen and literally all of these controls here become active, or I can actually change the parameters by using the touchscreen. You can't do that on the GT-1000. Now what I've also done with these patches is to add a clon style overdrive. So with the Quad Cortex, if I just want to add that, I can push this button here and it comes on. I could program the same thing with the GT-1000 core, as it has 3 foot switches on the front, so I could bring in that overdrive just by touching one of those foot switches. But what I'm going to do here is just use the software and bring it in there. Both units sound great. They do a really good job of emulating a clon style overdrive. Let's switch to the next patch, which is the Marshall patch. Here's a Quad Cortex. And here's the GT-1000. Quad Cortex. And the GT-1000. Again, these two models of a Marshall style amp do sound different, but one doesn't sound better than the other, it just sounds different. The GT-1000 and the Quad Cortex. Something else that I just quickly want to demonstrate is how by changing the speaker type in one of these units makes more of a difference than the actual amp model that's in the two of the units. So what I'm going to do first of all, if I play a riff on the Quad Cortex, and now the GT-1000, if I go into the speaker type inside the Quad Cortex, and let's change the speaker up here. Let's make it this Zilla cap here, this 1x12. So that's a GT-1000. And that's a Quad Cortex. So you can see you get a much more tonal variation by changing the speaker type than you actually do by altering anything inside any one of these units. So what I've done here as well, I've put in a tube screamer in both of the units. So let's turn on the tube screamer in the GT-1000 and also the Quad Cortex. So here's the Quad Cortex. And here's the GT-1000. Quad Cortex. GT-1000. Quad Cortex. GT-1000. Again, this is just a preference in sound. I'd be really happy using either one of these live or for recording. Now, one other feature I think I should show is how easy it is to change patches between the GT-1000 and the Quad Cortex. If you listen to the GT-1000, if I play a chord and hold that chord and change a patch, have a listen. It's pretty instant. Now, if I go to the Quad Cortex, there's a definite delay when you change the patches. Now, you could sort this out by using scenes, but then you're going to be using up all of your DSP. So you can't really change patches, or you can't really effectively change patches in the middle of a song. So at the moment you can buy the Quad Cortex for about £1,450 and the GT-1000 Core is about £600, and you can get the full version, the bigger version, which has more foot pedals of the GT-1000. You can get that for, at the moment from Anderton's, for about £900. Now, is the difference between the GT-1000 Core and the Quad Cortex, sound-wise, is it worth the money? Definitely not. I think the GT-1000 definitely holds up in sound compared to the Quad Cortex. Now, the thing that the Quad Cortex does that the GT-1000 doesn't do is it's got the capture feature. So if you're used to using valve amps and you're used to recording in a studio and you want to capture those sounds to either take out live or to use for overdubs at a later point, then the Quad Cortex is definitely the best unit for that. Personally, I really like the touchscreen and how easy it is to edit on the Quad Cortex. You can't really do that on the Boss GT-1000, as personally, I prefer going into the Tone Studio software to edit on the computer. Now, as I said before, you can't really do that live, so you've got to learn how to use that fiddly menu. But the GT-1000 is an amazing sounding unit. For me, the GT-1000 still has the edge at the moment on the effects section. I think the reverbs and the delays do sound better inside the GT-1000. I know that Neural DSP are going to be bringing out updates where they're going to be having some different reverbs and some different algorithms, and maybe that will improve over time. I'm not saying that the reverbs and the delays aren't any good inside the Quad Cortex. I think they're great. They're just not quite up to the standard of the Boss GT-1000. So I think the conclusion is, if you don't need any of the fancy features that come with the Quad Cortex, then the Boss GT-1000 is a fantastic sounding unit. If you do need the neural capture feature and you want to be able to edit it live really, really quickly, then the Quad Cortex definitely holds its own. Anyway, I really hope that helped. If you did get something out of this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and click on the bell button and you'll be notified of any future video that comes out from the studio ads. I'm Paul and I'll see you next time. Cheers.